Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelava and this is Speedplay Touggourt number 24. We left off with the plan being just a few simple, quick wars. We have a bit of a rebel problem, nowhere near what we've had in the last few episodes. We are at 122% overextension, which is a pretty legitimate problem. However, since we've been in a essentially civil war for the last around decade or so, we're really as ready as a person could ever be, or as a state could ever be, to deal with the rebels that pop up when you're overextended. So they are popping up, but we're just quashing them relatively quickly. We've declared war on Karakianlu, the Gelre state in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as Persia. Eventually we're going to declare war on Mewar, and by eventually I mean right now. Now we do need their lands, as well as the capital of the Timurids, to take over everything that we need for the decision to unify Islam. Unfortunately, we can't go about that, as we were just declared war on by Austria, bringing in Russia, and a few other minors that don't really matter. Obviously, Austria is going to be the most immediate threat, as they have a tremendous amount of men. France also ends up at war with us due to a colonial war. Luckily, it is just a boon to our economy. Our colonial nation has already won the war, so we just get a lot of free money, and honestly, that is a nice start to this. I thought that was going to be the worst thing, but it was actually a nice little benefit. So what we're going to do, obviously, is we've been building armies for this last few moments. We're going to chase down this Mewarian army, and hopefully just stack wipe all of their forces. We're going to try to conserve our forces as much as possible, not fight the Austrians in Europe, at least not right now. There are some enemy ships in the Mediterranean we'll have to deal with. Beyond that, we're just going to hold the Caucasus Mountains and see what we can do with our navy and all of the troops we can transport in order to harass. We have started building, as I previously mentioned, a few new army groups, 80,000 men, as well as all of the mercenaries available. We probably won't be able to win a stand-up fight against all of these nations. We do, thankfully, win our first war against Gelre, and that'll probably be the main goal, is we're going to win all of these little side wars as quickly as we can, trap all the Austrian armies that we can on various islands, and from there, we're just going to start picking off their forces. It's really the best option available at this moment. I begin splitting up all of our forces occupying Mewar. We may as well actually use our forces to the fullest ability. And I am moving the forces over into Russia. It probably won't do very much good at the moment. However, there are no Russian forces in Central Asia, so we'll hopefully make them actually reinforce there. We continue to carpet siege Mewar. It's very interesting playing in such an outdated version of the game now that it's moved on to the current method. At any rate, we are in, at least for the near future, a relatively stable position. Mewar is being sieged out, Persia and Karakianlu are being sieged out. We're flooding our troops into the abandoned wastes of Russian Central Asia, and we're getting all of our forces from Africa to our transports to begin harassing. Now, exactly how well that goes, I'm not entirely sure. At any rate, we are not in a bad position. Obviously, this is going to be a very long and probably drawn out war unless we can win some decisive victory, but I don't really think that's realistic. We are attacked in the Caucasus Mountains. Luckily, we do win the initial engagement, and one of our client states goes ahead and begins sieging out one of the provinces of Karakianlu. We begin spreading our forces in Central Asia and getting our ships ready to start winning some battles. Now, the most important thing is that we keep our army in a position where we always have just overwhelming local superiority when we fight. Now, this means mainly focusing our combat in areas of the Mediterranean where we have three fronts, essentially, that we can fight on at our choice. At any moment of our choosing, at any place of our choosing. We go ahead and block off 49,000 more Austrians, and realistically, we're going to have to block off a lot of their troops more than we can realistically hope to just block off. So we have to win some offensive battles. Right there we managed to destroy and stack wipe 30,000 men. We're going over to launch another strike and probing mission, however, they bring in too many reinforcements, so we pull back. Meanwhile, we continue to pull forces out of Miwar as they become available. Realistically, we have a massive amount of manpower, so it's not like we're going to be forced into a bad situation in the near future. As long as we cost the Austrians more than they cost us, we should win in the long run. Now we go ahead and pull our troops out of Italy, as well as continue to get more forces out of Miwar. We get another revolt, so we send a force from the Caucasus Mountains to deal with that. And we land 120,000 men in Crimea, stack wiping the force that was there immediately, and now rolling through. We managed to stack wipe yet another Austrian force and gun it forward. Central Asia is still going in our favor, although unfortunately, unlike the Mediterranean, we cannot quickly bring reinforcements to Central Asia if we need it. The fact that that front is quiet right now is the main reason it's going well. Hopefully it'll stay that way. We are, however, pressing our advantage in Crimea, and unfortunately I accidentally moved some of the forces blocking one of the Austrian forces on their island, so the Austrians managed to evacuate and get 50,000 men back in the fight. That was an unforgivable mistake on my part, and it's going to cost a lot of lives. Meanwhile, the Central Asian front is actually becoming active. We pull as many forces as we have available, giving us local superiority. We also win another battle against the Austrians. We are at this point losing quite a few lands in Greece. We do win the battle in Central Asia, and at this point it's going to just be us taking opportunities whenever they're available. We've pieced out of most of our minor wars, and we've defeated most all of the rebels. A large Austrian force is coming in to attack. Luckily we had 80,000 men in boats. Basically that was just to trap them in a terrible situation, and I'm glad it worked out. It's a little bloody, but it is working in our favor, and that's the most important bit. We get another 40,000 man stack ready to go, and we begin sending it up to reinforce Central Asia if needed. Meanwhile, we do win in the Caucasus, we do win in Crimea, and unfortunately we lose a very large portion of our navy, only around a quarter of our actual force though, but still enough to be worrying. I break off half of our fleet in order to go ahead and attack. Luckily, this is before the patch that stopped AIs from suiciding their navies when you tried to break a piece apart. So the Austrians just suicided their massive threatening navy, and we can hopefully go ahead and just deal with the navy that showed up. Meanwhile, our client states are losing battles in Central Asia, which is a bit worrying. Luckily, it's nothing like a catastrophe at this point, and we have groups of around 20,000 on every border province. So it's not like it's going to be an issue in the near future. Meanwhile, we are losing territory in Siberia. We do have 39,000 men, but I don't want to move them out of position as they're the only men we have in that entire theater. Meanwhile, we start bringing those forces from the Central Asian front over to Crimea as we're dealing with just a terrible and massive enemy army. It is the first even battle we're fighting, and they have a lot of men in reserves coming up very rapidly. We bring another 40,000 men into the fight, but it just does not look as though it's going to go in our favor. I begin building mercenaries, but that, as well as a revolt in Syria and 60,000 more Austrians on the way, leads me to just evacuate this battlefield. Luckily, they only have 10,000 manpower left. Unfortunately, the Russians have over 200,000. We will probably be able to beat the Austrians quicker than we'll be able to beat the Russians. We are at a point where we can almost certainly make peace with Miwar. Maybe not getting exactly what we want. I'm going to get all the lands that we possibly can just right out the gate. Unfortunately, I found out we can also convert them to our religion, but they won't accept all of that. So we're going to have to keep fighting for at least a couple more months. Now, with that all said, while the Russians will probably be a more long-term threat, if we want to get any lands from them, we'll have to defeat them in their own country. We don't have nearly as many advantages against Russia as we do against the Austrians, so most of our active combat is going to be done against the Austrians in Middle Europe. At this point, we still can't make peace with Miwar. We do have another rebellion. We'll be able to deal with that relatively easily, and we're just going to ship troops to another location so we can launch another attack and hopefully just wreck another Austrian army and not have a repeat of the defeat we just suffered. The Russians are becoming quite active, or at least slightly more active. We do get up to +3 stability, which is going to be good for our ability to endure this war long term. We hopefully have enough forces up there on the Russian front that we won't be able to be defeated easily. They do have a large force on the right flank. Luckily we win that battle as well, and it doesn't look like there's going to be anything like a disaster there for the moment. We begin shipping troops over to Italy, where we can hopefully unsiege some provinces and attract an Austrian response. I see what an ideal peace goal would be with the Russians, and it is just entirely unrealistic. Unfortunately, it would be 100 war score to get a ideal peace from them, and I don't quite imagine this war will drag on long enough for us to get that, although I may be wrong. At any rate, we continue to ship forces over into Italy. There is a large Austrian force inbound. We do move our forces over to deal with that. The Russian front is a bit quiet at the moment. We win that battle, not stack wiping the Austrians though, but they have very low manpower, so it hopefully won't be too concerning. Now we lose the siege of Theodora, which is a bit unfortunate. That means we're getting pressed back in Crimea. We pull some forces over to hold the the Caucasus Mountains, as those are the most important mountain ranges in this entire war. If we lose that, the Austrians will have a direct line. Unfortunately, while I was focusing on other fronts, a massive Austrian and Allied army stack wiped one of our 40,000 stacks. I build another, essentially just out of obstinance, and I consider attacking in really what would have been just a terrible strategic move based on a desire for just revenge. I pull my forces back though, as we only have 88,000 manpower now. It is not a good spot to be making bad choices. We begin pulling our forces back over to Crimea to win a battle we can hopefully win. They are just sitting on the Caucasus Mountains, which is very worrying, and I attempt to get them to attack us off the coast of the Italian mainland. Meanwhile, I do go ahead and get a very nice leader. I begin sending reinforcements over. However, at this point, I'm not really sure what the proper solution is. What we could do is either send reinforcements and maybe win this battle, or come in too late. Unfortunately, we do come in too late anyway. And doubly unfortunately, they don't retreat to the ships, they retreat to the other side of that island, and we're stack wiped again. I build another army, once again just out of obstinance. I should have just sent the reinforcements immediately. Instead, I second guessed myself. We lose a battle against Russia in Central Asia. That front is just collapsing, and we are losing a lot of men in Italy. Luckily, we do block them in, so we manage to stack wipe that entire force. However, while that's happening, our Russian front is collapsing. Meanwhile, there's over 100,000 Austrians in Italy. Hopefully I'll be able to convince them to come to this island so we can trap them. And at this point, I managed to luckily get our client state to hold back and come back to our army in the Caucasus Mountains, Caspian Mountains. I'm not sure exactly what the mountains are called. At this point, I'm mainly concerned with the complete collapse on two fronts that we're sustaining. However, a bit of good news, we managed to trap over 100,000 Austrians off the coast of Italy. And while they won't accept peace right now, if we can manage to stem the tide in Central Asia, we may very well be able to win this war. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. It has been an intense episode, and there is just more to come.